first, welcome, and
Thank you.
I hope you're well, my friend. And why don't we just jump in there and create a nice tight segue? And what they were talking about, and is it at 5G, and I'd be curious to know what percentage of your readers are reading on a mobile device, and you got video, and you got all sorts of things, and how much are you looking at these emerging platforms, 5G in particular, the edge, as it relates to your product development?
Yeah. So one, thank you for having me. It's always great to chat with you on. I feel like it's always something bleeding edge or innovative. So you definitely own that beat. I'd say like 5G. So 5G has definitely been top of radar for a while. Last year, I think even with COVID, all time is kind of a fog. But about a year and a half ago, we brokered a deal with AT&T to start building a story lab, experimenting around new technologies as they related to 5G. A lot of the discussions around that and opportunities around 5G when it comes to a newsroom go outside of the obvious. I mean, one of which I think is the most fascinating, is the idea of how you start to broadcast live news and in the moment live news. Like anyone who has been in a city or even in a town, but has like experienced when there's an event and the news team comes, it's usually like 3 trucks with a huge satellite dish on top of it. And,
Right.
broadcast is very expensive, very clunky, and very kind of like people heavy. And the way that we've been thinking about 5G and edge type computing is like, okay, like how do we start to build more efficiencies when it comes to reporting, when it comes to the work that we do?
Interesting. Yeah.
We've always had that mindset with emerging tech. Like we've done a lot of AI, as it relates to our journalism, and not in the position of, oh, how does AI replace journalists, but more so like, how does AI help support the work that we're doing and help make that a bit better? What's unique with us, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but the Post, I'm going to overgeneralize this, but the Post has a few businesses. One is the Washington Post proper, right, which is our newspaper and our media company. And there's a lot of different branches that come out of that. But we also have 2 other businesses. We have 2 software as a service businesses. One is Arc Publishing, which focuses on creator and publishing tools, and the other is Zeus Technology, which really focuses on the commercial elements of media. And with Arc Publishing, a lot of the partners are in broadcast. So we've really thought about not just what 5G and that technology could do for our own reporting and for our own newsroom, and how that helps drive our business and our user experience on the Post, but also how does this start to transcend beyond just what's happening at the Post, and how do we start to effectively better empower broadcast nationally or internationally, especially in our local markets, to make sure that everyone who is, of course, like a partner of Arc and the Washington Post, but also just kind of like watching and paying attention, how we could start to redefine like opportunities and abilities to do this, especially in the smaller and more local landscape where these sort of opportunities may be fewer far between, or even just too expensive to embark on. So
yeah, no, that's great. I hadn't necessarily thought about the production side of it and the impact of 5G and the edge, and that's it's fascinating. All right, so we'll back up a little bit. And Jarrod, who are you? Just tell us about your role and remit there at the Washington Post, and kind of a little bit of a day in the life.
Yeah, so I oversee our commercial business at the Washington Post, and I've worn a few hats over the years. I'm actually a rebound employee of the Washington Post. I've done a lot throughout my career. I was a journalist in the music beat. I was a cryptocurrency CEO. So there's a lot of things which I find, like anyone on my teams or anyone who I give career advice to, I always say that sort of horizontal laddering is always so fascinating to me, and kind of how I look to hire. I love kind of this beginner mindset when it comes to a lot of things, and usually that comes from people spending time in different areas. But I first joined the Post. I created the R&D group. It was really focused on like, how can we think about innovation? How can we think about new products as it relates to our newsroom and as it relates to our business? We found so much success in that sort of setup as a pocket of our business that we created the commercial group to effectively take that ethos across the entire company. So not just thinking about R&D in a more siloed environment, which is oftentimes how it's set up at many companies, but how does this group reach across all of our businesses, all of our disciplines? So we think about how we could evolve our subscription business, how we could evolve our advertising business, how we could build better and new tooling as it relates to our newsroom. But we're also set up in a way that allows us to identify trends and opportunities that may transcend the post and build new businesses out of them. So we've done that with Zeus, we've done that with a couple other technologies. And the team breakup is amazing. We're about 100 plus people with various disciplines. So AI, data science, emerging engineering is within this group. We have the R&D team. We have our programmatic business and our business intelligence that reaches across the group. We have sales teams. We have business development teams. We have product teams. So it's really like kind of a company within a company with the remit of trying to continue to push every element of what we do forward, especially as it relates to our business, leveraging the post as kind of a like alpha breeding ground of innovation per se that we could then open up and give to brands, give to publishing partners, and be somewhat influential to how other media companies or emerging creators should be thinking about their business.
That's awesome, Adam. I love the fact that, you know, data scientists are sitting there in there with the commercial people. And that is part what I wanted to talk about. And what I really always love talking to you about is because wherever you go, you're kind of looking to blow things up in a good way. And I like that. And so, you know, these silos, you came in, you kind of blew some up, you kind of merged some together. I guess talk to me. Obviously, you felt empowered to do that, and that's the first step, and that's great. But how did you do that? Like, you know, people, I'm sure there are lots of people listening right now that are in organizations that say, yeah, I need to blow this up. I need to get these people together. I need to break down these silos. How did you do that there?
Yeah, so there's like a couple, I guess, ways to think about how it was possible. The first is that, you know, my first time around, just speaking personally, we built the Red Group. We were focused on R&D, and we were influencing a lot of different areas. And I did want to do more. And I felt somewhat not like constrained or restricted, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't really easy to like be able to break through certain things. Of course, like any traditional media company, there's business leads on a lot of different areas. You know, there's leadership, and many media companies, especially legacy media companies, operate by consensus. So when you talk about like beautifully blowing things up, it's really hard to blow things up when you're asking for permission to blow things up. Usually people don't want that, right? So
right.
I found that the first go around, what was really kind of liberating in that ability to really think about breaking down silos is really try to identify something that you yourself could control, which sounds really hard, but it's really not, right? There are a lot of opportunities in larger organizations. There's a lot of people that much prefer to stay in their lane, don't want to pick things up. And if you have the I guess like personality and willingness to kind of step into new terrain, there are a lot of things and opportunities that are there that you yourself can control. And if you yourself can control it, there's way less barrier to entry. You can start doing things, you could execute things, and then everyone around you is like, wow, that was great. How do we start to get involved? And you start to build a reputation for being able to not just want to change things, but actually effectively change things.
And were you, oh no, go ahead, please finish.
Oh no, I was just gonna end with like this time, or like coming back to the post, the company, they didn't make a decision, but they did identify the fact that this was important, right? They did say that, you know, and I think if you look at the post among, you know, the media companies over the past decade, arguably like probably the most transformational, maybe the most successful of a turnaround. I mean, I remember when I was at the Huffington Post in 2010, I didn't even look at the Washington Post as a competitor. Yeah. I felt like that was way long gone. And now it's amazing how, you know, the traditional legacy media companies that have built reputation and have kind of weathered through the digital change are now the ones on top. But there was a decision, right? I think the Post is very forward in their thinking. They understand the elements of having to disrupt yourselves and how to kind of set things up in order to do that. And the creation of the commercial team was basically an admission and an investment in saying, okay, let's see what we could do working across teams. Let's give the tools and utility within this group to be able to work with other teams and see like what could be developed and what could come out of it. So I'd say like, it's definitely not easy. It takes a lot of grit. It even takes a lot of like letdown frustration. But the biggest thing is kind of like, what can you own and control and prove? Because once you can do that, then the company looks at you as the person, or your team as the team that can actually do those things across other things that people want you to blow things up. It's like, I love the way that you said that beautifully, blow things up. It's like, it sounds so aggressive, but there is a moment where people are like, we really need to just break it down and start over. And you have to take advantage of those moments.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dive in a little bit into the proving part that you just talked about. And I'm sure there were, some metrics that you had to deliver on. But what I'm also curious about is, you also have a relatively new owner, and I think some of this conventional wisdom of Jeff Bezos came in and saved the Washington Post. I don't buy that. I think the Post was already transforming before he came in, and certainly him coming in, I think, has even added more advantage, and I think that's great. But I'm curious in terms of, since he came in, and what of the sort of Bezos philosophy of either operations and fewer silos blowing things up, what changed, and how have you been empowered since he arrived? Not necessarily his personal presence or him coming in and saying, let's do this, but more the philosophy through the organization. And what have you learned and you think other people can learn from in terms of sort of the operating principles that he brought to the organization that it's empowering you right now to do what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'd say, like, first and foremost, having an owner that is, arguably the greatest technologist, and businessman, woman, is pressure to kind of prove the purchase right. So what I'd say is, like, for me, I joined after Jeff bought the company, because I was attracted to that. I was attracted to this idea that the modern media companies at that time that were most interesting were very technical first. They recruited very great engineering teams, and they really thought about product and putting that on the forefront. But they lacked reputation, right? Mainly just because of tenure. It's like, if you're only a 5-year-old media company, how much reputation can you accrue versus an 85, 90, 100-year-old media company that has gone through and done so much for society? And what I saw with the opportunity of Jeff, Bezos buying the Washington Post, and what that really meant was, like, now you have a technology company, like, owned by one of the greatest technologists with the reputation of a legacy brand. What magic could be done there? And I'd say there's, like, so many, depending on who you ask, there's so many amazing things that Jeff Bezos has brought to the table, and like, one of which, for me, as someone who runs engineering teams and thinks about tech, is talent. Right? Like, the idea that, oh yeah, Washington Post says they're a tech company and they build businesses and do all of these different things, but are they really? And I think you've seen over the years that by way of having an owner like Jeff, we've been able to attract talent from top platform companies and places and people that would otherwise go elsewhere.
That's great.
Like, one very practical thing that has been amazing over the years is the Jeff Bezos Memo philosophy. So if you've read about a lot of kind of the Amazon culture, it is a memo meeting culture, which is really interesting. Like, every week, or whatever the cadence is when you meet, everyone is encouraged to work out their thought or whatever they're going to discuss in a memo. And you basically create that memo, it's sent prior, and then within the meeting, you actually spend the first however much time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, in silence, reading the memos. And afterwards, you then ask questions. It's open for discussion. Maybe there is no discussion, but it's a really efficient way to really think about bringing people together and sharing information. But even more so, what I found from a product and innovation level is that when you sit down and have to work through your ideas and think about how to remove hyperbole, right? And just be, like, straight to the point about what you're looking to do, you really start to work out, like, is this valuable? You answer questions before they come up, and you flesh things out in a way deeper and more detailed way than you ever would have if you just plan on going and having a discussion. So Jeff's brought that to the company. There's all of the tech setup. I mean, we have 2 very large technology businesses now outside of the Washington Post that, it would be crazy to think that we would have been able to do that without,
Yeah.
someone like him. So,
And that's a good segue into, like, I'd be remiss, and we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, and I want to ask, certainly some questions about your product and what excites you about the future. And I know David Kirkpatrick will probably follow my question up. David Kirkpatrick, our editor-in-chief at Techonomy, who's a huge fan of the Washington Post. So I know he wants to ask a question. So I'll ask this and then I'll go to David. But, what excites you in terms of new product, the future of news, if you will? And you can not only use what types of interesting new products, maybe even services you're offering at the Washington Post for the reader, but also your other businesses, right? Because those are certainly driving innovation across publishing as well. So between what you're doing with the Washington Post and your products, what is my Washington Post app going to look like next year? And some of the other tools and platforms that you're helping build and allowing other publishers to innovate. What's coming up?
Yeah. So kind of pairing your previous question to this question, when Jeff Bezos owns your company, there are expectations that you're a tech company, right? So we kind of had to figure out real quickly what that meant. And there was heavy investment in technology in the newsroom, but there was also, by way of that, a realization that much of the software for publishers, creators, basically anyone that's putting IP on the web, is oftentimes created and decided outside of the publishers and creators themselves. And we realized that when we started to invest in software within the newsroom, we saw, we license from this company to do this, and we have we're inadequate in this area because this company doesn't do this. And we realized that there were so many holes to fill when it came to process and efficiency and news and content creation that we started investing in that in ourselves. And what was amazing, and this started about 7 years ago, I think at this point, and that was kind of the impetus of one of our businesses, which is Arc Publishing, which is a suite of tools that was built first and foremost for the WAPO newsroom that run the gamut from content management system to workflow management system to broadcast to data analytics. And we saw that there was such a need to build these sort of tools with the lens of what it means for a publisher and the kind of intricacies of how that relationship works internally, that it now powers, I think the most recent number is about 1,500 partners globally, publishers like Dallas Morning News and the Boston Globe and Tribune, and then a lot of international publishers as well. And we built a very solid, it's now 150 person employed business within the Washington Post. So that became a big business on itself and allowed us to both dually innovate with the product and software that we're licensing and market, and also keeping us on edge to what we need to be doing within our newsroom. But we took a similar approach to saying, okay, we were able to easily identify by means of investment where the media ecosystem was lacking when it came to tools. Where else is the media ecosystem lacking where we could take advantage of? And when you think about revenue and how media companies make revenue, they don't own anything. It's from the ad server to the demand to all of the data software and targeting software, all of that is from third party, oftentimes from tech mammoths. So we started to invest in that too. We said, from an advertising perspective, what can be built that makes publisher inventory more valuable? How do we reduce the overhead for publishers to really be thinking about how they could drive more revenue? How do we connect them together, right? How do we build a marketplace that could be competitive with Facebook or other platforms that are out there, that better benefits publishers and brands? And that was the Zeus technology business. And it's been really fascinating. I'd say one thing that I'd leave this group thinking about, which has been really fascinating, is when we first launched Arc, right? It was a great tool, but it was always what publisher is going to want to license this from the Washington Post, right? Especially publishers that would feel it's competitive. It's this is something so key. And at that time, everyone was investing in their tech teams. Well, what happened a few years later was media companies realizing, well, why are we staffing such a large tech team to not be as strong as we possibly can? Let's reallocate those resources to content and what makes us unique, and let's license it. What's amazing is the same is happening with advertising. Before, advertising was held to be sacred and wasn't necessarily shared or collaborated. And the Washington Post and let's say the Dallas Morning News were competing in market. Now with Zeus, that's not the case. You have a lot of these publishers starting to license this software,
Right.
starting to think about how they could collaborate with advertising against larger platforms.
I mean,
and it's just a change.
Both the Zeus and the Arc story are sort of similar to AWS, right? It's like, we're going to build this for ourselves. We need this for ourselves. And hey, like, other people might find this valuable. I'm going to bring in David Kirkpatrick, who I know wants to ask a question before we wrap, and then I'll come right back and I'll wrap up the session. So David, go right ahead.
Thanks, Drew. So thanks, Jarrod. So Zeus is the name of the product that you've licensed to all these other newspapers?
So Arc and Zeus. Arc is the content management system that we've licensed to about 1,500 publishers. Right. Zeus, we launched 1.5 years ago, actually during COVID, was kind of like the peak of it. And that is a commercial software that's independent of Arc, though they work together, that now has about 200 publishers on board.
What does it do?
So Zeus is really focused on how we can drive more like advertising revenue for different publishers, but we're also introducing a marketplace. So in June, there's going to be about 150, 200 publishers, especially in local, nationally in the United States, that is going to have very unique contextual targeting that's not affected by the cookie and legislation, and have a buy-side tool where brands and advertisers are going to be able to buy in and purchase against this marketplace. So we're really looking to have something competitive to like the whole Facebook workflow on the open web.
Well, that's kind of a holy grail. Well, congrats on that.
Yeah, hopefully it works.
Well, it's worth trying, I hope. One of the things that's so interesting about media is that the blurring of the edges of everything, right? I mean, I was at Fortune for years, and I remember 15 years ago, I said, I think we're going to end up competing with the network news. And, that was sort of a radical notion, but I was the tech person, so I was supposed to say things like that. But here it is, now I watch, some congressional hearing on, I can't even tell if I'm watching MSNBC or the Washington Post or the New York Times or C-SPAN or whatever. Meanwhile, you have media innovation coming from all kinds of places. Most notably right now, everybody's hot on Clubhouse, which I'm probably not as excited about as some. But what are the parameters of your business technologically? That's what I'm asking you. And are you being required in your work to think even about things like Clubhouse? What does this mean for us? What, obviously there's all kinds of other things that are happening in social that are totally new, out of left field things. Talk about where the edges are.
Yeah. So we originally kind of set up our group to really identify and have a POV on those sort of things. It's funny, like a year ago, or not a year ago, that's impossible, but like 7 months ago, and I've never shared this, but like 7 months ago, I proposed that we at WAPO create our own sort of Clubhouse-like application, not Clubhouse literally, but I was early on Clubhouse. I was able to see what the community was offering. I thought it was very interesting to be able to have that access. And we at the Post always think about like, what are different subscriber benefits we can give to people who subscribe? But I thought, wow, what would be really cool is if there's a way to be able to maybe tap in, like if you're a subscriber and hear the story behind a story from one of the journalists, or journalists give exclusive interviews with politicians or someone that may be top of mind. Exactly. So like we at that time, we just had a lot of different priorities, so we didn't move forward with it. But I would say my focus is definitely to understand trends. Like there's a lot of stuff that I focus on in the creator economy right now. And I'm looking at companies like Stir, and I look at what's happening with Substack, and I say, well, are these areas where we as the Washington Post brand could start to inject ourselves? Is it an opportunity for us within the Arc Zeus ecosystem to start to create a competitive product or a companion product to these things? Or is it something completely new, right? And I think like all of those things, for me at least, I see a ton of opportunity in identifying what's happening, especially like in the broader industry landscape, and trying to figure out how we bring it back, and if anything, have a POV as to what that could mean.
Right. So you do have a print paper, but you're really not seeing yourself as a newspaper company anymore in any fundamental way.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, I'd say we definitely at the executive level, we are first and foremost a news. Like, it is interesting. I've gone through a lot of emotional feelings with this as a technologist. Like in the beginning, I was like, look, we have all this opportunity to build off of the Washington Post brand, and we could build Arc and Zeus and become a tech company. And every time I say that, like the press loves it, but there's always this kind of like, we are first and foremost a newspaper. And I realized even in my like my technical defiance of wanting to beat Adobe, right, and beat Google at their own game, I realized quickly that like, oh, the only reason why Arc and Zeus exist is because of the reputation of the Washington Post. I think if we created something like this outside of it, it would have been a different journey. It wouldn't have gone as quick. Who knows if it would have stuck. So I realized real quickly that that identity of us being a newspaper and 100-plus-year-old reputation and all of the investment and work that we test and put into that is actually our secret sauce. So I would say like we have identities outside of it, but absolutely, I think it's important for us to stick to the newspaper identity and what we do for society and democracy. I think that is key.
Thanks so much, Jarrod. I'm going to turn it back to Drew, but really great interview.
Yeah, thank you.
And as always, David, great questions. So look, Jarrod, we're going to wrap it here. And again, as I've been saying to everybody, and certainly we've had some good conversations on stage before, and I look forward to seeing you in person. We all get together and have one of these chats and have a drink. But continued success over there. Keep blowing things up. Everything is going well, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Our pleasure, Jarrod. Thanks.